YouTube. DigitalOcean is a cloud provider that will let you create virtual machines and also provide networking and storage in their network. I was looking at trying to add a virtual machine, which they call droplets, and I noticed that they didn't support AlmaLinux. They have support for Ubuntu, Debian, CentOS, Rocky, Fedora, and FreeBSD, but not for AlmaLinux. I read through some of their documentation, and they have an option to create a custom image. That image must support one of these file formats. I will be using the QCal2 format, that is what is used by the hypervisor called KVM that's built into most Linux installations. There's other options here, these VMDK or VDI. If your hypervisor can generate that type of file, you can then take that file and you can import it into DigitalOcean. Some of the things here they list as prereqs. The image must have a Unix-like OS. Basically, it must be some type of Linux. The size of the image can't be more than 100 gigs, and that's uncompressed. The file system must support ext3 or ext4. Now, I have an automated way that I install my VMs, but I'm going to have to do it manually and then go in and select the ext4 format. You must install the cloud-init package, and the package in AlmaLinux seems to work okay without any configuration. You just have to get it installed. You have to install SSH and set it up so that it starts at boot up. They also note that Windows images are not supported. And there's some other options here. One of the things I read is that the custom images also support creating snapshots and doing backups within DigitalOcean. So the first thing I need to do is I need to create an image that I will use. Let's see if I can pull it up here. I have a script that I run to create it. Let's call it DigitalOcean Alma 8.5. The smallest disk size that you can have on DigitalOcean is 25 gigs. I'm going to go ahead and create my image with a 25 gig disk. But if I decide to put it on a VM that has a larger disk space, all I have to do is grow the partition and then extend the file system. And I have a previous video on how to do that. So let's make it a 25 gig disk. Just for fun, we're going to do 4 gigs of RAM. My interface is NM. And I have to put it on one of my bonded interfaces so that the Pixie boot works correctly. So it takes that and it starts installing. Make that larger so you can see it. I'm going to do an AlmaLinux install. I'm going to have to do it manual because I have to change the file system to ext4. Now I'm going to skip over this install and I'm going to get to the point where you have to choose the file system. Now for my installation, I'm going to do a minimal install, but I'm going to tell it to include the guest agents. That way I can build off of that install and install whatever system I want. So here's where you go to the installation destination. The default file system is an XFS file system. So you have to go down to storage configuration here and hit custom. When you hit custom and you hit done, you select the option here to create the partitions and the mount points. And most times I use LVM. That way, if I need to expand the file system, it's a lot easier. So here you see the default is XFS. I want to change that to ext4 and hit done. It gives you a summary of the changes and lets you know what it's going to do. You just hit accept. And then you click begin to start the installation. And we will let that go ahead and install, and we'll come back once it's ready to go. The install is complete. Gonna go ahead and reboot it. All right, we got a login there. Let's see if I can make this bigger. And I can. I'm gonna have to close this one. Go to this one. And we called it that. Tell it to scale. Okay, so there's the new system. Go ahead and log in. I'm logged into just a bare system with no host name. And you can see there it's the latest AlmaLinux. So if I try to do an update, there's nothing to do because it installed all the latest packages. Okay. By default, SSH should be already installed. To go here. So SSH is already running and installed. When I go to SSH to it, all right, so if I do a DNF search and I search for cloud-init, there is the package that I need to install. And it tells me it needs to install all these other packages to install cloud-init. So I'll say yes, and I'll let that go ahead and install. And it looks like it's got a bunch of Python dependencies, so let those go ahead and install. Let's see if it installed. All right, cloud-init service is enabled, but the default is disabled. But that's fine. So all we need is the SSH and we need the cloud-init. And we don't have to do any configuration on the cloud-init. So let's see, the SSH. So I'm only using about 1.7 gigs out of the 25 gigs, not including the boot and the swap space. So I'm going to shut down this VM. Go back into my virtual machine manager. Going to look at the properties for this virtual machine. And I'm going to look at the disk. And this is the path. This is the path to the disk. So what I want to do is I want to take that disk, and it's a .qcal2 file, and I want to compress it with gzip. So let's go over to and I keep the disk for my virtual machines on a separate 3 terabyte drive. So now that we've shut down the VM, this is the qcal file that represents the disk image. But what we have to do is we have to run a sysprep on it, which will get rid of a bunch of information that's unique to the VM that we created. So let's see, it says Virt-sysprep. And I'm just going to show you the options that are available. Now this Virt-sysprep runs under KVM. If you're running some other type of hypervisor, they may have some other tool that you need to use. Okay, here's a list of all the things that the sysprep does. Like it removes the bash history, the hardware address, any MAC address information that's coded in, removes password backup files, blah, blah, blah. It gets rid of the SSH host keys so that when you upload the image, you can create multiple VMs from it. The one thing it does not do is it does not remove any existing user accounts. Now, I didn't create any user accounts on here, but if there are accounts on there, you could use this option to get rid of them. So let's do a cut and paste. It says try run. And there's, if you do a man on Virt-sysprep, it gives you all the options that you have for it. But I've already read through them. And I'm going to attempt to paste them in here. I'm going to do a dry run. And I'm going to add our file. And the operation is user account. That's telling it to delete any user accounts that may have been found. When you look at these options here, the ones that have a star next to them are enabled by default. And it looks like they are all enabled except for this user account. So if I had an IP address on here, DNS information, it's going to wipe all that out and just reset everything to DHCP. So I'm just going to do a dry run first just to see if there are any errors. Okay, so I didn't get any errors there. So I'm going to go ahead and do it for real this time. So I'll get rid of the dry run. All right, so there's our file, and we've run a sysprep on it. So it's now ready to compress so that we can send it up to DigitalOcean. We are in root. Come on, sudo su. Okay, I'm root in the same directory where the qcal file is. So I'm going to do gzip. Tell gzip to use that qcal file. I like to put a space there. For the output file, I want to tell it to put it in my home directory. Call it that. Call it .image. .image. Image.gz. So we're going to let that gzip run, and it's going to go ahead and it's going to compress the file. It's currently 26 gigs, and I believe it'll be somewhere less than 2 gigs after we compress it. All right, the file is finished compressing. Let's check the size of it. All right, the file actually compressed to 1.3 gigs. So that's pretty good compression. Now that we have a compressed image file, we need to upload that image to DigitalOcean. I created a test project here for this. So when I go to create a droplet, which is a virtual machine, here are the supported operating systems. I'll go to custom images. I will add an image. And I will tell it I want to upload an image. It's in my home directory. It's the one that ends in image. I will hit open. We'll give it a name that I could recognize. I'm going to say it's a CentOS. Here are the data center regions that are available. They suggest New York 3, and I will accept that. I will hit upload image. And you get a little status window that tells you it's uploading. So you just have to sit and wait until it finishes the upload. All right, the upload has completed. It says pending here. Now there's going to be a little notification that pops up that says it's been added. So you basically can't do anything until you get that pop-up notification. I didn't get the pop-up, but it says that my image has been installed. It says it's uploaded and it's in region NYC3. So when I go to my test project and I go to create a droplet to VM, I go to custom images. There is my custom image. Now this defaults to a droplet with 8 gigs of RAM and 160 gig drive. You have to make sure you select whatever one you want. This one down here at the bottom, 1 gig with a 25 gig drive. It's $6 a month. If you just want to do some testing, you could do regular Intel and it's $5 a month. I'm just going to do a $5 a month for this example. So I select that. I don't want any block storage. I want the droplet in New York. It's going to use the default network. And whenever you create droplets in DigitalOcean, they use SSH keys. You go ahead and tell DigitalOcean that you want to use your existing SSH key. You have the option here to enable backups. It'll do 1 backup a week. And you have some other options here that I don't use. You can add a tag to it, and then down at the bottom it says create droplet. And it goes through some processing it does in the background, and it creates a droplet for you. So we're going to wait for this droplet to install, and then we're going to log into it. Okay, the droplet's installed, and it's got a public IP address. I'm going to make note of that address. Copy it as well. So when I go to that droplet, when I try to go to the console, it tells me I need to run these commands to install the software that'll let you access the console from the web browser. Now I tried to run this install script. It didn't work, but I'm going to show you how to get the console installed. Your option right now is to launch the recovery console, which is basically a console to your server. And you go ahead and log into it. And you can see it's got its private IP address. I'm sorry, its public IP address and its private IP address. And you can see that we're running AlmaLinux 8.5. Bring that down so I can see it. Okay. Now to get the actual web console working, you have to install a few files, and I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to do a cut and paste from over here. If I can. Yeah, Control V. before you can install the web GUI console, you have to install the GPGME and the CA certificates packages. Says they're already installed, so that's fine. The other thing you have to do is you have to add a repo. DigitalOcean has a package that you have to download and install, and they have a repo that you have to download it from. The droplet is running, and now I should be able to access it from my home machine. I just need that IP address that I wrote down. I did a cut and paste, but I did something with it. There it is right there. I want to copy that. And so if I SSH root at that address that I copied, it lets me in because I have an SSH key set up so that I can SSH to it. Now I'm logged in, and I need to create a repo so that I can download the web GUI package from DigitalOcean. I'm going to go to rum.repos.b, and I'm going to create a file, and let's call it, I'm going to cut and paste this since it's pretty long. Copy agent.repo to insert. I want to paste. Oh, not that. Okay, you want to copy the repo information from here. So I do a copy. Come over here and I paste. Okay, this is going to be the name of the repo. That could be any name. Give it some kind of description. The base URL has to point to this repos-droplet address and the $ base search at the end here. And these are just all other default settings. So then we have to enable that repo. And I'm going to cut and paste again because it's a lot easier. So we're going to disable the other repos for now. We're going to enable the droplet and tell it to update the DNF cache. It says it's done. And we need to install the droplet agent, which is here. Do a DNF install the droplet-agent. And check the status of that. systemctl is the command. All right, it says it's enabled. Vendor preset is disabled. I'm going to just make sure it's enabled by default. Let's do a DNF. I'm sorry, it's systemctl again. Make sure the droplet agent is enabled. So when I go back over to this screen, go into my project, access console. It says login as root. I said launch the console, and it's using my SSH key to connect, and it goes ahead and it logs me in. Now you have to be aware that AlmaLinux has a firewall on by default. And by default, it allows connections to Cockpit and also to SSH. So right now, this machine is on the internet and SSH is open to the world. Now the machine has SSH keys enabled and it won't allow password logins. That's the way DigitalOcean sets up their machines. You have the option of either going into the VM that you just created and turning on the firewall and, well, adding rules to the firewall to permit trusted sources, or you can go into the DigitalOcean and they have an option here to create a firewall also. It says secure your droplets. You can create a firewall and you can attach that firewall to any of your droplets. And in that firewall, you can specify what host you want to allow to connect over SSH. Select the droplet that I want to apply that to. And you have to know the name of the droplet. We'll call it that one. And I'll hit add droplet. And it says firewall updated successfully. Now what that will do is that puts a firewall in front of the virtual machine that I created. And those were the steps that you need to create an image that you can upload to DigitalOcean and create virtual machines for AlmaLinux. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.